This is John Doxey with Dennis Hearne in his studio at 480 Francisco Street. And this is June 2nd, 2022. This is our first interview for the Telegraph Hill Dwellers Oral History Project.
First? I thought you had two.
Our first.
Oh, our first. Okay.
In case there's a second. Okay. Dennis, I'd like to just start off by asking you to tell me a little bit about your early life, where you were born, what year, name of the town, maybe a little bit about your family, how many brothers and sisters you had, things like that.
Yeah. I was born in Vermont, directly across the river from a little town called North Walpole, where Ken Burns has his thing in Walpole, the next town down nowadays, of the movie NPR world. But I was born in a town called Bellows Falls because we didn't have a hospital on our side of the river. Yeah, and it was a small town on the New Hampshire side, working class town, definitely. My grandmother was on that side. That's where I lived until I was 7 or so, and she had about 13 kids. So that was in the late 40s. I was born in 47. The ending of a certain period of America's history. All these guys had been in World War II. They were butchers, carpenters, night watchmen, whatever got them through financially, except for my father, who left and joined the Army and stayed in the Army in World War II. He was the only one that stayed out of town. I think he did it sort of to get his education, because he finished college by the time he was out of the Army after 33 years. And high school and college, actually, which is nice for him. But that town was the kind of town where no one locked the door. You could just drift into anyone's house. And uncles, you could stay wherever you wanted to throughout the village.
A large family with
13 uncles, or mostly uncles. Yeah, you could just say, I think I'll stay over at Johnny's house tonight. Goodbye. Yeah.
Did you have a lot of cousins? And
yeah, a few, not as many cousins as we should have, but we had some cousins. And my brothers and sister, I have three, a twin sister and a brother and another sister who died. So I had there was 4 kids in the family. But we only traveled with my father when I was 7. That's the first time we headed out down to Fort Belvoir, which is near Washington, D.C., and did our first military base visit. And then every time he'd go out of the country, we'd go back to our town and live at the old family homestead there for another 2 or 3 years until he got stationed somewhere in the States where we could go.
Because at that time,
you couldn't go overseas because of Eisenhower. Until Kennedy came in, you couldn't bring a family with you because of Cold War. When Kennedy came in, we could finally go. My father had already been there for a year or 2 maybe. But I spent most of my high school in Italy because you get stationed there, near Livorno, Pisa.
So where you were living back in New Hampshire. And you were how old when?
Oh, I was a freshman when we went over there. I did my sophomore, junior, senior year over in Italy. I'll drop a lot of the earlier stuff because we're almost after Italy. I sort of came here.
You went to school in New Hampshire primarily, unless you were moved.
Yeah, I'd say it's yeah. First few years, then a couple years away, then back a few more years, then back away, then back, that kind of a thing. And I still know all those people. I mean, if they're still alive.
Where are you in the birth order?
I'm the last. I'm the
youngest.
Well, I'm a twin, so I was very polite. So I'm the youngest.
So you have a twin?
Yeah, she lives in Texas. Yeah.
And when a lot of kids, when they are high school age and the family decides they're going to move to a foreign country, the kids are not too happy. How did you feel about this?
I can't remember because I was in New Hampshire at the time, and maybe I wanted to get out, maybe I did. I can't remember because we'd moved so many different times, not that many, but 4 times is enough. I can't remember when I didn't want to move. I know at the beginning, the first time we moved, I didn't want to move. I can't remember the high school one. But when we got to Italy, it was great.
And where in Italy did you?
Pisa, Livorno, which is near Florence, about an hour from Florence.
There was a U.S. Army base there?
Camp Darby, which is, I think he was a ranger who hit the beaches in World War II, and then he built a base around that.
And what were some of your, if you can remember, interests that, things that you were really spending your time doing when you were that age?
In high school? Oh, basketball, and photography, and painting. I wasn't painting except for in school, but photography, just in general.
How old were you, do you think, when you developed an interest in photography?
Well, I think because my father traveled, he always had a camera, so I saw stuff, and then he kind of passed them on to us as time went on. I think he gave me a camera to go to Venice one time. I went to Venice, and I shot my roll of film, but I didn't advance it right, so I got two frames and then just nothing. I mean, on top of each other. So I learned how to advance film after that.
Were you? Did your brothers and sisters also have a similar interest, or was this something?
My brother was a musician. I was the recording engineer. My brother and sister had a little band in Italy with an Italian drummer. I forget the name of the band, but they went around and put out posters and things in towns and get Italian people to come. It was fun. Rock and roll.
Artistic family.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. And so...
For Army kids, maybe, yeah, possibly.
What was it like when you moved to Italy? You'd never been lived anywhere out of the U.S.?
No, it was great because I think the first night we sat down and had a dinner with my father's, like his aide or something. He worked in a motor pool at the base, like on trucks and stuff, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what he did, but he was out there, and he had lots of Italian helpers. And so we met his family and started learning the name of a fork and a spoon and this and that. They were pretty well dressed.
Did you, excuse me? Did you begin to learn Italian?
Yeah, well, because the problem was I did, but I should have learned it a lot better because in high school you kind of tend to be with your peers, and most of those were Americans, and so we didn't speak Italian amongst ourselves.
You went to an American school.
Well, on the base, yeah. You didn't have. I guess you didn't have to, but we did. Yeah, we had a few Italians on the base too.
What was it like in terms of maybe bringing new perspectives to you?
Well, I mean, of course, Italy is known for the Renaissance and all that kind of stuff, so it's probably a big influence. I think when I went to the Art Institute, I think we had to, or maybe when we were thinking about going somewhere, we had to say, what do we want to do? And I think, I used some Michelangelo quotes and all that kind of stuff that I had at the time to write my paper for high school. It disappeared long ago. Wasn't cut in stone.
Did the living in Italy and the exposure to the art there and the architecture, did that further your interest in painting and photography?
Well, it was painting in Italy, but photography when I got back here because of the civil rights movement and stuff like that. I mean, I never painted anything down in Louisiana, that's for sure, because we moved to Louisiana and then I came out here. I think that the Italian culture in general, because that was Italian time of Fellini and Antonioni and all the Italian actresses and actors of that period. I mean, now I couldn't name a new Italian actor. I don't keep up with it. I don't know if the young people do. I don't know if it's a generational thing, or at that time we were more into the international, the movies and things of Europe in the 60s and 70s. I'm not sure how it's changed, but I think it has.
So after spending how long, 2 or 3 years in Italy?
Yeah, about 3 years.
Your family moved back to the States, to Louisiana, did you say?
Yeah, my father was heading for Vietnam, so he didn't have to go to basic training, but he was stationed there for a little while, and then probably to hang out in the swamps for a while or something like that.
Did you complete high school while you were
Yeah.
still in Italy?
No, I didn't. I finished it.
When you came back?
Yeah, I didn't know anybody. A couple guys, basically, when I got here.
And so what happened after you finished high school?
Well, I had to either go to Vietnam like everybody, or I decided to go to college. And I said, well, where could I go? And I probably applied for catalogs in those days, for 20 art schools from, I think, Mellon or something, Carnegie, something in New York, something in Boston probably, and then the Art Institute, LA something, down there, Art Center, I guess. But the Art Institute, the catalog, I think, sold me because it looked like Italy. It was the front door, and it showed this building, which is Spanish colonial, I guess, or something like that. And
so the Italian nature of
the neighborhood,
North Beach,
well,
the neighborhood.
After research, I said, well, yeah, and also it's visually interesting city versus, most of the other cities, you just see the buildings, but not the sky or the water or the land around. This is probably one of the few cities that's got enough hills to see beyond itself, whereas like in New York, you just see these buildings or maybe the sky if you're lucky. So, and then I had an Italian community, which I thought would be interesting.
You were accepted to the Art Institute?
I think anybody would be accepted if they paid $350.
And what was the year that you came?
65.
Okay. Yeah. And how old were you at that time?
I guess I was 18. I'd have to figure that one out. Yeah, because I was born in 47. I'd be 18.
So did did you find what you'd hoped to find when you came
65.
here?
That doesn't make sense. Or does it?
No, that makes sense. Yeah, if you were born in 47 and you came.
Yeah, that's why I didn't go into math. Anyways, what'd you say now?
I said, was it what when you came here, was it all you had hoped, or did you find what you'd hoped for?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I didn't hang around with the Italians like in my head I thought I would, but because the school kind of took over. But the city was really, I don't mean white people, I meant a white city, like Southern European, like Spain, I guess, the white city, white towns they have at the time. And now it's a lot more color on the building, or maybe it was then, but to me it seemed like a real white city, like Mediterranean.
The light.
Yeah, the light was hard light, contrast, that kind of stuff. But the whiteness of the buildings too at the time. And nowadays people have painted them purple and black and stuff like that. It's different.
And when you entered the Art Institute, your focus was on painting initially, right?
Yeah, but I never took a painting class. I think immediately I got into photography. I don't know why, but yeah.
Was that because of, like you said, the events of the time?
Well, they weren't happening too much then. I think I just somehow, I can't remember how I would have decided to not take painting and do that. I think I was afraid of the painting, basically. It was so abstract, maybe. I didn't understand it. I said, well, at least I understand photography. I think I'll do that. Yeah.
Were there some professors or fellow students that you were particularly drawn to at the Art Institute?
Not really at the time. Oh, later on, yeah, but not when I went there. I didn't know anyone.
Who was the director of the department?
When I went, it was a guy named Blair Stapp, S-T-A-P-P, who did documentaries, I found out later, like of the Tenderloin at the time, same as now, and worked for KQED, and his films were about, which I'd like to see again, kind of street people, and but he died young. I forget why, but I mean he was probably 40 or maybe 50, but young. And then a guy named Jerry Burchard took over after him, and Jerry had been a student at the Art Institute in the 50s, late 50s, and did some great photographs of the beat, not the beat, but the painters from around that period, and mostly painters, I guess. And he went to the school as well, but he was brought back in. He went to New York for a while. He may have worked on something like what you do. I don't know exactly, but something. He had a job there. And he said he used to have a darkroom in his apartment, but he'd wash his prints in the shower because he didn't have a sink to wash them in. So it's kind of interesting.
And did you get you got a BA and
I got a
MFA?
BA back about 69 or 70 maybe, I don't know, because I went away for half a year in the middle of it. About 70 probably, and then I left but not too far. I think I lived on the corner. So. And a friend of mine, Bill Arnold, who was running the photo department's, not the teaching part, but the rest of it, the structure, the equipment, and all that kind of stuff. Headed back east, so he turned the job over to me. And so I came back to the school. And if you work there, you could go to graduate school in a house, basically, part of your deal. And then I think I taught a little bit after that, up to about 78. And then I kind of left.
And part of what you were focusing on darkroom printing and?
You mean when? No, I was focusing on taking photographs. I mean, the darkroom.
That too. I just thought you had developed a certain expertise. In
yeah,
that.
I was pretty well. I was a good printer in the darkroom, black and white, not color. Didn't get into color until the late 70s. But black and white, yeah.
And tell me a little bit about the community of people that you hung out with at that time who were affiliated with the Art Institute.
Well, the Art Institute, like you've heard before, well, it was kind of a North Beach thing, and so you knew the neighborhood, and it was sort of part of the school at the same time. If you worked at the spaghetti factory, theoretically at least, you could get an Art Institute scholarship through Jerry Burchard and come to his classes and study photography, but not have to go to the school technically. You could just kind of visit. And so when he became chairman, it was around when Blow Up, the movie, came out. And everybody got into photography, or a lot of people did at that period because of the strangeness of it all.
The Antonioni film.
Yeah. And actually there was 3 photographers in it. Later we can talk about that another time, involved in that renaissance of photography, so to speak, of fashion photography at least, in Britain at the time. And anyway, when that movie came out and he came in, we went from about, I'd say 70 photo students to about 300 in about a year or two. And about that time, Stephen Arnold and Michael Weiss, who were filmmaking students, I was a still photographer kind of guy, and for them, they were supposed to show their film at the school, but they said, well, we want to show it in a theater, so they rented this theater down here, which is the Palace now. The Palace on the corner. Now it's a condo building.
Oh, the Pagoda?
Pagoda, I'm sorry. I think it was called the Palace at the time, then it changed to the Pagoda. Anyways, they rented that, and then after they showed their movie, the guy said, well, you can have it if you want it. And so they started the Midnight Movies, which sort of joined North Beach Art Institute to the neighborhood. And a friend of ours would get in her Moroccan clothes and walk through North Beach advertising it at, like 11 o'clock or 10:30, and wander through the streets, and then people would come to the theater. And that's where the Cockettes had their first performances, which I can't even remember because the thing started at midnight, probably ended at 4. You could nod out at about 2 and wake up and something had happened. You go home.
So those were good times.
Yeah, it was very easy living in North Beach. Financially, was probably a big part of it because you could get a meal for basically minimum daily requirement, which was right where this building is, right south of the Trieste, a little bit, was a place where you get this pea soup and bread for like, I don't know, $1 or 50 cents or something like that. So you could live on nickels and dimes basically and still eat, pretty well. And so rent was cheap and food was cheap.
Where did you live when you were going to the Art Institute?
Where did I? I came at a residence club first because that was the cheapest thing to do for me, and I wasn't progressive enough to just kind of do it on my own. So get an apartment and stuff, and I was out of high school. I figured you pay a certain amount a month, you get breakfast and supper, and you get to meet the cook, and you get more than you wanted to eat basically, and take a portrait or two.
Do you remember the name of the residence?
Yeah, it was called the, hang on a second. It's on Sacramento at Franklin. I'll think of it in about a half an hour.
Monroe?
That's it, Monroe's Residence Club, that's it, yeah. I don't think there's many of those left, actually. Monroe residents.
Those were very popular for young people in the city at that
I
time.
think at the time, and it probably wasn't for my age, but for people that had just got divorced or something, because my roommate in the bedroom, we had a bed, 2 single beds, and the guy was like, probably 30, maybe he was 20 something, but to me he was like, 40. So he'd come in every night, and mostly everybody was single, but they weren't my age really. Maybe they were just professional people, and I didn't know what even that was at the time.
And did you end up moving to North Beach at some point?
I wandered around, and I didn't until what happened was I went from one resident club to another. Then some people from there went out to the Fillmore when they were starting to tear it down, and then even the National Guard came in there one time. I forget when that was. It was probably 66, because I left the city in the summer of love just before, and I noticed yesterday someone published that Sgt. Pepper's came out yesterday, June the 1st, in 67, and that was a crazy album, obviously, but I'd sort of had enough of craziness.
You'd have enough love in San Francisco?
Yeah, I'd had a big extra large portion of a cup. I said, well, I'll go back to Italy for a while, and so I did for about 6 months. But Italy had cheap imitations of the Summer of Love, and you couldn't, and all the rest of the stuff I already knew, so to speak, because it was all historical things. And so I said, I might as well go back to San Francisco or Vietnam. so I went back.
Easy choice.
Yeah.
Was the reason you went to Italy was it related to photography?
Well, because I had felt comfortable in Italy, and I wouldn't know. I could have gone to Germany or something, but I had no interest in that at the time, or even France, because I spoke a little Italian. At least I could get around. That was 67. Yeah. So I went back kind of because of that, and they had a language school. Of course, I didn't hang around with Italians again. I hung around with a South African and a guy from Israel, so I never did learn Italian again. So one more time.
And then you ended up coming back to San Francisco.
Yeah, I came back and continued the Art Institute.
The Art Institute.
That's why I was away for half a year.
And what did you do when you came to San Francisco as a young guy, 18 years old, and for just to earn enough money to?
Well, I worked at the lab at school. I mixed chemicals, and I ran the lab, but I didn't run it because they didn't have that position at the time.
And you got paid to do that?
Yeah, you made a little money, enough to pay your rent, and I washed dishes and things like that. I don't think I waited tables at that point, but all the things you do.
Is another reason you came to San Francisco perhaps you mentioned that you have never had a driver's license?
Oh, right, yeah, I came because I guess we could have got it. I just asked a friend the other day about that who lived in Italy. He said, yeah, I got my license, or I could have, I guess he said, but we didn't.
And you don't really
And
need
here,
to drive so much here.
I figured I could save money by not having a car, and so I lived within a mile of the Art Institute, basically. I had it down to a mile. I said, I can't go beyond that mile because I can walk to school every day.
And how was it, during this time, you were a student and also doing some teaching and working at the
School.
At the Art Institute. How was your own work evolving?
Well, let's see, as a student, I guess we did projects. There was a guy named John Collier Jr. who was a social anthropologist. I think maybe there's a different word, but there's an anthropologist, visual, one of those words. He was a photographer who had done a lot in the Southwest, and he was a good teacher about working on a project or sequences and things like that. And Jerry was good at that too. So I always was working on little projects like that. But about 70, I think in the graduate, when I was running the lab there in the early 70s, I got into my heritage, like some people do, of course, sometime in your life. Got into Ireland and went to Ireland twice. Each summer after I teach a class, I'd use the money and head over there for a month. So you make just enough from a class to buy a ticket, hang out for a month, hitchhike around. And it felt like another century in Ireland at the time. Nowadays it wouldn't feel that way, but back then it still felt like.
And you were giving yourself a kind of documentary assignment when you went there?
Well, I went to see relatives that I never met, obviously, but that were the brother of my grandfather, who I did know, but his brother, people like that, who still had the accent from way back, and still did everything that farmed and everything. You know, they didn't even have running water. They had to go to the neighbors to get water every day with a horse and buggy and a 5-gallon milk can.
What part of Ireland was
Near Waterford, a town called Mooncoin, which doesn't mean that.
That's where your
Yeah,
ancestors come from?
yeah, as far as I know. On the Irish side. I don't know about the other side, but yeah. Anyway, yeah, I did it. I have a good set of photographs from there, from that period. Then I went back in the 90s, but it felt like a different country by then, because all the tech people were starting to come in, although it wasn't developed yet, but you could feel that you could feel it starting to happen. Yeah. That was the main sequence, and then we did, then as school got out, we applied for NEAs, and we did this thing called, about Baja, Highway 1, 5 photographers, which there's a couple photographs on the wall here from there, where we had to shoot from the tip of Baja to the Tijuana, and it was about Highway 1. It had just opened, or maybe it had been opened and washed out and reopened or something. Anyway.
And that was funded by the National Endowment for the
NEA
Arts?
through the California Historical Society. So they funded us to shoot it, but they forgot, or actually I think that they lost their building about that time over here, up on Pacific Heights. Something went wrong with their whole economic situation and the director and all that kind of stuff. And so they never had a show. But they still have 50 photographs from each one of us at the Historical Society in their library somewhere. 8x10s we had to turn in at the end. In a diary kind of thing. It was fun.
Were you beginning to sell some of your photographs?
Yeah, I sold a few here and there, but I never have approached the gallery all my life, so it never happened that way. So I'm still more of a neighborhood photographer in that sense, yeah.
And I think one thing that you have done, I don't know when it began, but is more on a commercial thing, is the political
that was a chance. There's a chance job that to sort of continue the, go, so to speak.
So did it start with one, and then one thing led to another?
Yeah, it's kind of like that. I mean, I didn't look for the.
What was the first one?
It was an easy photograph of someone at a microphone at a downtown hotel somewhere that we just walked into and used as though it's a lie about speaking to crowds. A woman could speak to crowds. So it's sort of an advertising shot.
And who was that person?
I can't remember the name. It was a woman. She was totally for the city and all that kind of stuff. But I don't remember the name. I've probably done 1,000 of these things.
Didn't you begin doing some things with Clint Riley?
Yeah, well, it was for him, actually. Yeah.
Oh, he had hired you for that?
Yeah, he probably hired me, so to speak. Yeah, I guess so. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Then I think we did a real campaign, which was Citizen Matsui, Bob Matsui, up in Sacramento, who was a congressman. And his wife is still the congresswoman from Sacramento. So that's been since 78 or something. One family has been Sacramento's Congress family.
Did you begin to develop a reputation among some of the campaign people?
Well, I worked for him for quite a while, probably for 10 years. Not every year, even not, just when he does something that he wanted me to shoot, he'd drag me into it. It wasn't like a full-time job or even a part-time job. It was, hey, we got a campaign over here. Can you come and shoot it?
But would your work pick up when there was an upcoming election?
Yeah, it's a cyclic thing. It's like picking crops or something like that.
And do you want to tell me some of the politicians whose names we would recognize, who you've shot for?
Yeah, I think the first one that would be recognizable would be Barbara Boxer, because she was a congresswoman from, she was was she a senator? Yeah, she became.
She ended up as a senator.
Yeah, first she ran for Congress, then she became a senator. Yeah, and she's very small, petite, first shot we had, this was a big storm that had happened in Marin, so it happened to be the day that we were supposed to shoot her. It's all black and white, just me, no film guys. And most of these cases are like that. I go in sort of like soften them up, sort of get a signature for them, like they did this and that, but it's a story, so to speak. And then the film guys come in later, and then I drift to the background and become unimportant, of course, because they're there and they have scripts and the whole thing. So it's an interesting watching the cycle of that kind of world. But yeah, the first shot we did was a butcher who was probably 200, maybe 300 pounds, big guy, and Barbara. And how do you make her look, like she's captivating the moment? Well,
so what did you do?
I can't remember anymore, but you have to get down or something or whatever.
Or put her on a milk carton or something.
Later she got her own thing going there, a little box. But that's happened more than once where suddenly there's a guy, a roly-poly guy who was all about numbers, and there's this, he's talking to the truck driver that's, it's like 6 feet and 7 or something. It's interesting to see the things you have to work with, because you wouldn't do these naturally, but on a job. And it's not a job where it's a fashion job where everything's, you have a makeup person. No makeup in general, we just shot natural light. So it's kind of documentary in a way, except for you study how the light works on people, so you get them in better light.
And I imagine they want it to be a kind of a flattering shot, if it's a campaign.
Well, flattering is, to me, synthetic, so no, it's just relatively honest as you can be in that situation. Flattering means, to me, all shined up and stuff. I never kind of do that. Nowadays, you can kind of do it in Photoshop, but I don't do it with most people. Just fix a few hairs that are stray and things like that. Yeah.
Any other?
Well, we had Feinstein, Pelosi's first campaign, which was a congressional campaign, obviously, and she's still there. Feinstein's first campaign.
For the mayoral?
Yeah, I've done it. Well, Feinstein was a mayor, but I'm trying to think of the other ones over the years. I've worked on different campaigns, but they're not like, in that sense, they're not, Kamala Harris, we did her first campaign. That was a scruffy one down on 6th Street. We just wandered along the wine country at the time, it was called. And just ad-libbed as we went along the street, basically. Yeah. Mostly a lot of women. Obviously, there's a lot of women.
Gabby Gifford, was she one that you did?
Oh, Gabby, yeah, Gabby did, Gabby. Well, we'd fly away and do things. That was from Mary Hughes, who does mostly women's campaigns or promoting women candidates.
So, like I said, I think it sounds like your name kind of got out among some of
the... Yeah, well, it's a very small circle in San Francisco, and so...
But wasn't there one in Montana that you did?
Oh, well, that's Tester, yeah, but that was pretty recently. Yeah, actually, I have a book here that they published and used one of the campaign photographs, which is kind of nice, because they paid you for it. I don't make that much in a campaign, actually, because it's somehow they make more on the TV and all that kind of stuff. So whatever, as long as I have the work, I'm happy. Some kind of work once in a while, pay the rents. Yeah, we did him and Heidi Heitkamp. They both lost. We've done the governor of Washington State, governor of Arizona. Not Arizona, Las Vegas, Nevada, yeah. And a congresswoman over there. 2 congress ladies, actually. They're all women nowadays. And senators from Colorado. I probably hit every state except for maybe 3. Yeah. As far as these are usually Senate or congressional races, and I don't get the job. Someone else gets the job because they're known around D.C. as campaign people. It's not my world.
And did you say that a lot of the folks you knew in that world are beginning to retire now?
Well, yeah, definitely, yeah. So. I don't know what I'll be doing, but I'm getting older too, but I can't retire. So I'll keep on shooting, I guess.
So what are some of the other I guess, genres or projects that you're working on?
Well, I've been working on the architecture of the neighborhood. There was just something that I sort of was doing with Nancy Shanahan for the Telegraph Hill people, although that the paper, the survey was written up, but we didn't use, photography-wise, it was, I have them, but we didn't need them for whatever she was doing there to make it I can't think of the word right now, the neighborhood.
The semaphore?
No, not the semaphore. Whatever the neighborhood would be called up here, it's sort of a protected neighborhood as far as architecture and things like that, recognized at least by the state and by the city. But it was supposed to be every building in the neighborhood. Somewhere behind it, so you can't get to those anyways.
Oh, so your assignment was to...
It was not a paid assignment. I was doing this anyway.
Your project was to photograph every building in North Beach?
Yeah, but I didn't do it. I said I'll do blocks and stuff. Just the way I shoot. I'm not going to, because that'd be kind of a paid job if there was a budget for that kind of thing. There's like 1,000-something buildings in North Beach, plus the ones behind the old cottages and stuff. That's another story. You have to knock on a door.
It seems that you really do like to do a lot of your shooting at night.
Oh, yeah. Well, the architecture would be a daytime thing, and the nighttime world, I think, I've always shot in nighttime, but I think one time I was going to a show at the Live Worms up there on Grant Avenue, and I wandered down the street, and they were playing some music in the Trieste. And and what happened was the music was really interesting, and the crowd was interesting, because it was like 3 or 4 guys playing at the back wall. And then some people like learning English as a second language in the corner, and somebody reading a book over here, someone working on a computer over here. So it was a mixture of happening within one space while music was going on. And then other musicians were showing up. So by the time you ended the night, it was like 10 musicians. A Japanese guy playing Elvis Presley stuff while standing on a table. He didn't hardly know how to play the guitar at that point, but they let him have his song, Don't Be Cruel or something like that. So they let everybody that weren't great musicians have their little piece of an action. And so I kept going back to that, and that got me involved with musicians more than I had been. I've shot lots of musicians, but not as a web that it kept developing, a web of intrigue and music throughout the city. So now there's probably at least 100 musicians that I kind of follow.
Not just in North Beach, but around the city?
Out in Haight or Fillmore or whatever, But then the night stuff, because it's the daytime, you're stuck with the sunlight, which is beautiful. But at night, you have a lot of other funny things happening. A car light goes by or whatever happens. So light is always changing, and you have no control over the like the colors, like in the windows of somebody's house or something. So I got into that part, which is color, not black and white.
And what kind of a camera do you use when you're...
Well, now I'm using a Sony. I've used Nikons and Canons. All of them have been fine.
But for night shooting?
It wouldn't matter, really, because most cameras are made, with high ISO capabilities. But I'm not the kid I used to be, so I'd like to go light and inconspicuous and something relatively small on my body. So I wouldn't carry the Nikon out at night. I got rid of it anyway, but same thing with the Canon. And just need a fast lens, basically. A couple lenses, that's all usually people would use. They have their 50s or 35s or maybe a wider lens that they use to shoot. Keep a few in your pocket and you don't need a bag.
Did you say that you like to do kind of midnight rambles?
Well, yeah, maybe after the bar.
But is that a nice time for you to catch certain kinds of things?
Well, because you're by yourself, there's not many people wandering the streets, which it's fine when the crowds are out too. But you're more reflective about the light because it's quieter, and so you see it a different way than you would at 8 o'clock at night when everyone's bustling about. So, I like to wander through Chinatown about that time.
You do a lot of what appears to be chronicling the neighborhood in a way, and not just North Beach, but into Chinatown. And it's very interesting. And
Well,
do you do that? I mean, in your mind, are you thinking of this in a connected way? Like this is part of a project?
Yeah, it is part of a project. Well, I did one book which is pretty well done called Bright Moments, which is called Bright Moments because, with photography, and it's positive, not negative generally. And there was an album recorded called Bright Moments at Keystone Gallery up by the police station. My studio was kitty corner to that club. And so one day it just came to me, well, the Bright Moments was recorded across the street. I was there when they recorded it. Why don't I use that as a title for this book, which is about positive things, although the book does end with a lot of closings of places and last walks or last calls of places that are gone now, like Cap's Corner and things like that. Yeah. But then the newer one is probably more abstract kind of thing. Not so historical in that sense. But, I mean, some shots are, but this type of thing here is more like just a visual thing rather than about a history of a certain time, although that does relate to Ukraine, this one up here on the left.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. But it's just a subtle one. I mean, it's not obvious like flags and stuff like that.
Other themes that you've had, I think, include circus.
Well, not really a circus, just the people in San Francisco that are performance people. Yeah, they were kind of related to the stuff back from the Palace Theater, Pagoda Theater. Same kind of people. That.
When you describe yourself on your site as a documentary photographer, do you see yourself as kind of documenting or chronicling the city in a way? Its life, its people?
Yes, but I'm missing a lot of it. I don't hang around in the outer Sunset, for instance, and I wish I did more, or other parts of town I never get to. So yeah, I'm always documenting the city, and there are plenty of photographs that document it for any person, whereas other stuff like this is a little more abstract and less about history. So I'm kind of mixing the two, but not being totally a documentary photographer, which can kind of look I mean, if I look at books that are documentary, sometimes I can't look at them very, very often. I have to have a visual interest as well, because it's just what...
Did you ever think, or maybe you did for a while, live in another U.S. city, New York?
Oh, no. Well, I went to New York for about 6 months once. That's the only other city I lived in.
Did you do a project there?
Well, I was... Since I went to school with Annie Leibovitz back in the Art Institute days, and she was an underclassman, and I helped her printing and stuff at the time. She asked me to come to New York 10 years after she started at Rolling Stone to print her negatives, which I did. And then I kind of stayed in New York after that, but I never had a job in New York other than that. And so New York's kind of a cold city, and I said, well, in San Francisco, I could still live economically compared to the intensity of New York as well as the finances of all that stuff. It also was a dark city. Like when a photographer came out to teach at the Art Institute, I think in the late 60s, Phil Perkis, I think his name was. I think it was Phil. He said, I came out here and I had to close down my lens 2 stops because it's so bright out here compared to New York. That's true. And I think of the East Coast that way in general. It's a darker, the light is more closer to the ground, I guess, or something. And you get a lot of trees, for one thing, very dense with trees still. Plus architecture from period pieces from Europe related. Whereas here we're kind of Asian, and the end of the U.S., kind of Mexico coming north, and all kind of entanglement of cultures. And so that's one good reason to be on the West Coast, because you're not solidified into the to the colonial states, essentially.
We haven't talked about your personal life at all. When did you're married?
Yeah, Maguey is a painter right here. We met about 96, I think, when I moved into the old studio back there on on Vallejo Street. And she's a painter and she was more of a graphic designer and illustrator at the time. Somehow we met, I forget where, a bookstore or something like that. Yeah, Stacy's. Graphic design. I was into typography myself and graphic design. So yeah, we've been together for quite a few years now.
And you live where?
Well, we live in Coal Valley, although we have the studio in North Beach. I used to live up on Salmon Alley by the cable car barn for like 20-something years. That rent went from $450 to $4,500, so I said, I think I'll walk on that one. So, and then the other studio was inexpensive, and I had that for 23 years as well. That was a big one.
You perhaps it's because your studio is here in North Beach, but despite the fact that you live over in Coal Valley, you seem to be a real North Beach person. You're here a lot of the time.
I don't know anyone in Coal Valley actually, except for my neighbors across the street and another guy down the block. But somehow I never made any relationships out there. It's kind of strange, I think, but it never happened. And I've been there all these years. I think I'm usually just heading for the bus. I don't even hang out at a local bar, which is Finnegan's Wake, and any Irish guy would hang around at a bar like that. But it's almost too close to home. So I go to the Club Deluxe to hear music. I used to, not as much anymore. But
on Haight Street.
Yeah, Haight doesn't seem to have a. Maybe I have to know it better. North Beach, there's sort of what I call this the Golden Triangle. At one point, it was Tosca's, Vesuvius, and Specs. That's a little triangle, right? And then it gets bigger as you go through the stations of the cross, so to speak, around bars to bars. You get the saloon. Keep going north from there, but etc. North Beach has a night crawl rhythm where you could start at the north and work your way south, or you could start at the south and work your way north. And you used to be able to go to the city lights until midnight, I guess it was. Now they close at 8 o'clock, so it's almost by the time you get there, they're closed.
I wonder if they'll reopen or stay open longer.
They've had some trouble with the COVID, and so it's mask on again in there. Well, I like the history of North Beach because even there you have a photo agency. When you enter the city lights, where you enter now, not the original old entrance, but where you enter now, there's a tile on the floor and it's split down the middle. There was a photography studio there, and you can read some of the words. And then
Fotografia, it says Vita something, Fotografia.
And then there's another one, Sandino, over on Stockton Street. It's still a photography studio, but it's Chinese photography studio across from Walgreens. So those kind of histories, those are like the little jewels everywhere, the little stones that you can rub.
Your work, is it? Do you have gallery?
I don't have
exhibitions.
I said I've never approached a gallery for.
So when
there's usually been go ahead.
Do your work sell through word of mouth? Is that
mostly word of mouth. I mean, I put some stuff at Live Worms or.
But you've also been collected, I think.
By here and there over the years. Well, when I think that's part of when you're teaching. You're involved with lots of other schools and this and that. It's a perk of teaching, which I sort of regret that I didn't pursue because, I have a couple of pieces at the MoMA in New York, not here. I never approached these guys, and now I wouldn't know how to approach them.
And some other universities and museum collections.
Well, England did it. I don't know how that happened. They did a thing called Other Eyes or something, a show from people that weren't from the British Isles, and they used some of the Irish photographs, like 10, and then they bought some. So that's in the whatever that collection is called in England. Once in a while they have another show, and they use one of those again. But the one at MoMA was kind of an interesting thing because in those days you could call. Can I come over and show my work? Sure, come on over. And so you'd bring your portfolio over and actually they said, well, can you come over tomorrow or something like that? Yeah, fine. And then you get to the subway or almost to the subway, and there's a little lady walking along the street saying, "Can you help me find the lighthouse for the blind?" And I saw a blind woman in my heart. Well, hey, maybe I can call MoMA and say, you wouldn't believe this, bud. I'm trying to help a blind person find the house for the blind. So that's what I did. And they said, well, just come back, tomorrow or the next day. It was easy in those days. Now you probably couldn't get anywhere near it unless you're somehow, been discovered by whoever out there. So it was fun those days.
What are some things that you have as plans or goals, if you will,
well,
for the next few years?
Well, I still like to shoot around, which is, every day I go out, I say, well, should I be shooting or should I be at the studio printing? Well, I got to dig through the archives, definitely, and get rid of some stuff as well. I just started doing that the other day. But no, I want to shoot architecture outside of North Beach when the sun's out, I hope, with the architectural camera. And nighttime stuff, it just happens. I never know what's going to happen. It's a chance. Yeah. Anyway, we continue to go to Mexico and shoot. But it's like everything, You want to go to you like one place, but you want to go everywhere. And when you go to the next place and say, I wish I would have just gone back to where I started because it was a nice town. Oaxaca's a beautiful city.
There's a lot of advantages to specializing, though, and really
Oaxaca,
getting to know this.
Yeah, the people. I know a few people in Oaxaca, but it's a town where you don't have to know people. You kind of feel like you know them already because it's very friendly as far as the city goes. San Miguel is another story. To me, that's a little less, well, it's more Americanized, I guess, as part of it. Plus, my guy acts as my translator, and she loves it there. And
she's from what part of Mexico?
No, she's from near El Paso.
Oh, she's from Texas.
Yeah, she's born on this side of the border, but her mother language is Spanish, Mexican Spanish, and but she's from more Chihuahua area. Her family.
Does New Hampshire still hold a place in your heart?
Oh, sure. I have relatives that I go to visit and things like that. Now I like. It's hard to shoot there because of it's too nice looking almost. You know what I mean? It's like in some places in Europe they're so clean. I can't figure it out because it's too postcard almost. Here we're a little rougher still in the city, but of course, you go to Water Street and you could be any time period basically around the corner here. But yeah, New Hampshire I like it, but you've got a lot of traditional houses and this and that, and one culture essentially, white culture. I like it, but it's specifically what it always has been. It hasn't changed too much from my point of view. Yeah. The funny thing is, I used to go there in the '90s. Was it? I think the '90s. Yeah, probably before we had internet access too much, and you could disappear for a month and not have to deal with anything except for the telephone. But now you can't disappear anymore. That's kind of a negative, I say. Because there I'd go about 3 weeks, I wouldn't even think about San Francisco, but now you can't do it. Yeah, so we're locked in.
Well, let's say, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you
Not really.
think we ought to?
Not at this juncture.
Not at this juncture.
Yeah.
Well, Dennis, I want to thank you very much for
Yeah.
sitting for this interview, and
Yeah.
this will be great. If we think of anything else down the road, we'll reconvene.
You can email me.
All right. Thank you.
All right.